Alright, welcome back guys. So in this video, we're going to give our users the ability to search for listings in our database. So this should be a very cool video because we're not going to see how to just do a very basic sort of search. We're going to see how to do a full text search. And then why a full text search is really cool is because it's a lot different than doing something like filtering where, let's say, the title has a certain keyword. Because when you do things like that, where you use things like a contains search, then you're just comparing raw text and it has to match exactly with, let's say, the title. Now, this isn't very practical because the user can type a search query in many different ways. They can have, let's say, a plural form of a certain word, or maybe they can include words that don't really matter in a search query. Things like the word the, or at, or and, or in, at, and so forth. There's a lot of these words that don't really have any relevance in a search query. So what is a way that we can have the user type a search query and properly determine results for this user? So that is where full text search comes into play. So I just quickly want to jump into the documentation for Django on full text search. And you can find this by just going to Google, typing something like Django full text search, and then it's going to bring you here. And then here we have a little description of this. So the database functions in the django.contrib.postgres.search module ease the use of PostgreSQL's full text search engine. And then you have different things that you can do. So the first thing we're going to try to do is this search lookup. That's going to be our first goal. And then in order to use the search lookup, we need to have this inside of our installed apps. So I can start off with that by putting django.contrib.postgres inside of my installed apps. So I'm going to copy this, go back to my code. I also want to note that I'm running my server and I'm running my database, so make sure you're doing the same. So I'm going to open up my core settings.py, and I'm going to go into my installed app setting right over here, and then say right below my static file setting, I can put this one in here because this is required in order to have this functionality, because this is something that comes with Postgres. So now with that, let's jump into our listing app, open up our views.py and also our urls.py because we are going to have to make a new URL endpoint. So for now, I'm going to jump into my views here, scroll to the bottom, and then right below this listings view, I'm going to make my next class-based view, which is going to be for my search. So I'm going to call this class search listings view. And then I'm also going to inherit my API view as always. And then this endpoint right here is one where I don't want the user to need to be authenticated in order to hit. So I'm also going to pass this permission classes attribute and set it to permissions.allowAny, just like how we have here with this listings view. So I'm going to go ahead, pass that in here, and then we're going to define our method of get. I'm going to pass in self, request, format of none. And then as always, I'm going to wrap this inside of a try except in case if anything happens to go wrong. And then if it does, we're just going to have a 500 internal server error. And then I'll just say something went wrong when searching for listings, since I think that's an error message that makes sense. And then for now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to have one query parameter be expected, which is going to be a query parameter called search, which I'm going to store in a variable called search. So this is going to come from request.queryparams.get search. So this I'm expecting to be called search. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to copy this class right here, go back into my urls.py. I'm going to import this class-based view. I'm going to copy down a line here, and then I'm going to have something like search here. So that way when I hit API/listings/search, then I'm going to hit the endpoint, which is going to utilize my search listings view. And then of course I'll chain on this .as view as always because I'm dealing with a class-based view. All right, so now let's jump back to here, and I can also close up this urls.py and also this settings.py. I don't need this anymore. And then also I can make the text a little bit larger since I think it's a little bit small right now. So maybe I'll set it to 16 just so you guys can see this a little better. So in order to do this search, this is what I need to do. So I'm going to have listing.objects.filter. And then for now, I'm going to filter by the title, and then I can put on this double underscore search, and then that's equal to my search, which is what I'm retrieving from my query parameters. Then I can store this in a variable called listings, and then I can return a response, which is just for now going to be a success that says everything went okay, with a status of status.hdp 200 okay. This is what I'm going to have for now because we're going to be doing some little tests here. And then the first thing I want to do is just have some print statements. I'm going to have something like listings, and then below here, I can print out, say, listings. And then I could also have a for loop where I loop through these listings. So for listing in listings, I can also print out listing, and maybe I can print out listing.title, just so it's very clear which listing this is. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to open this up just so that we can see the output of these print statements. And then I'm going to open up my Postman app. And then here I don't need to deal with any of this auth stuff because, again, this is an endpoint where we don't need to be authenticated. So I'm going to make a brand new endpoint. This is going to be a GET request, which is going to go to HTTP localhost 8000 API listing search. And then we need to have a query parameter, which is called search. And then here we can pass some value. And also you can pass these query parameters here in this params tab. So I can also type the value right here as well. So let's do something like woodsman. And then actually something that I can also do is I can open up this auth and then log in for realtor user. I can send off a request here, grab this access token, copy that, and then I can open up this retrieve realtor listing or listings. This way we can actually see the listings that we have right now. And then I can just update this authorization header to have the correct access token, send this off. So right now we have 2 listings, and then one of these is published, and then another one of these listings is not published. So the one that is published is our 5 South Woodsman Lane. So let me go ahead and save this. I'm going to save this inside of my listings and then listing. And I'm going to call this search for listings. So we should be able to now send off a request. So I'm going to send off a request. We just get back this success for now. So going back inside of here. So now if we take a look, I get back this 3 South Woodsman Lane and 5 South Woodsman Lane. So let's go back here. So now let's test out putting, say, a plural here and maybe even making this D capital. So let's see what happens in this case. So I send off this request, and then back inside of here, I still get these 2 results. So we can see that case sensitivity does not matter, and also if this is plural, it does not matter. But if I put something like an X between here, and then send that off, let's see what happens. Here we now have an empty query set. So in this case, we did not get back these 2 listings. Then another thing that you can also do is here you can also filter by is published. So in this case, when a user is searching, we technically want these listings to only be published. So if I send this off right now, passing in this right over here, then what's going to happen is we're just going to get back this 5 South Woodsman Lane because this is the only listing in our database that's published. So this is how you can perform this full text search. But now what if with our search, we don't want to just search for if our search query is inside of title, but we also want to see if it's inside of description. So maybe we want something like description, search is equal to search. All right, let's try that out. So if I go back to Postman, send this off, well, our query set's empty. So this didn't actually work, even though Woodsman is inside of the title. So we saw that that worked, but now as soon as we added this, it no longer worked. So this is now being treated more like an AND. So how do we now accomplish something like this? Well, let's go back to this documentation. And then if we go down, we have the search vector section, and it says searching against a single term is great, but rather limiting. The entry instances we're searching belong to a blog, which is in this example, which has a tagline field. To query against both fields, use a search vector. So if we want to search multiple terms, we have to use the search vector. So that's where this comes into play. And then here it shows you how you can import this. And then this search vector, it's something that we want to use in conjunction with a search query. So we're going to take a look at how this works now. So first off, I need to go to the top here, and then I need to import that search vector and that search query. So I need to do from django.contrib.postgres.search. I want to import search vector, and I want to import search query. So these things are going to be working together. So now I can go down. All right, so here's my search listings view. And now this is how this is going to work. So I'm going to remove what I have right now. Then I'm going to chain on a .annotate. I'm going to pass in search is equal to search vector. Pass in the string title. I'm going to chain on a .filter. And I'm going to have search is equal to search query, passing in search. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to go back into Postman. I'm going to send off this request, and let's see what happens now. So I get back 3 South Woodsman Lane 5 South Woodsman Lane. And then I can also filter with is published, where it's true. So now if I send off this request now, and I go back, now I only get back 5 South Woodsman Lane. So this is the way that it worked before. So there's really no difference between this and what I had before, where I did that double underscore search. But now with the search vector, what I can do is I can also pass in description. So if I save this, and then I go back here and send off this request, now what's going to happen is I actually do get back this 5 South Woodsman Lane, whereas before I wasn't. All right, so now we wrote some very confusing code. So let's now talk about what's going on here. So the search right here, which is coming from my query parameters, is the text you are searching for that's present in the listings. And search query, this converts the search into a particular format that makes it easy for the search vector to make a comparison. Now, in terms of the gritty details that go on in the background to accomplish this, it isn't too important, as it's the responsibility of the two classes search vector and search query to ensure this behavior happens appropriately. And the details of how this happens is abstracted away from us unless you really want to dive in and analyze the implementations of these classes themselves. It's similar to how we have functions like math.random, where we know this gives us a random value, but in terms of the implementation, this is abstracted away from us, just like how we know that search vector and search query work together in order to make a full text search happen. Although these details are abstracted away from us, but we can rest assured that they will work together correctly in order to help us perform a full text search. Now, another thing that you can do is, let's say this right here, I can store this inside of a variable that I can reuse. So I can have something like vector is search vector with title and description. Then I can pass in vector here. And then this search query, I can also cut this, store this in a variable called, say, query, and then I can pass in query in here. And then what I can do is right over here, I can do something like print vector. And then I can print vector. And I can also even print the type of vector. And then I can do the same thing with the query. This way it'll make it very clear what these things are. So we got query, and I can pass in my query variable here, and then save that. So now if I go back to Postman and send off this request, let's see what happened. So first we have vector. We see that this right here, when we print vector, it just prints out something like this, search vector with title and description. And then we can see that the class of this is django.contrib.postgres.search vector. So it's the search vector class. And then the query, same sort of thing. We have this search query, and it's of type class search query. So now we know that the implementation of each of these classes, they work together in order to accomplish this full text search. But a lot of this detail is abstracted away from us. Now, there are things that we can do to kind of see what's going on. But before we go into that, I also just want to go over this annotate, because this is also something you've maybe not seen before, and it might be a little bit confusing as to what this is. So, when we perform this full text search by searching for more than one term, we see we do an annotation before we filter. This annotation is something that annotates each object in the query set, where the query set is just the class that represents the data that gets sent back from our database so that we can access that data in Python. And this annotation provides a list of query expressions to each object in the query set, as the query set itself is an iterable with objects. So each of these objects then further will have this list of query expressions. So each argument passed to annotate is an annotation that will be added to each object in the query set that's returned. Also, I want to note that when you do an annotation or a filter, you will get back a query set. But when you use something like listing.objects.get, in this case, you're not getting back a query set, since query set is an iterable. And when you use something like listing.objects.get, you're not getting back an iterable. You're getting back a single object. So when an annotate clause is specified, each object in the query set will be annotated with the specified values. And then the name for the annotation can also have a provided alias when you specify the annotation, like we have here with this search. This right here is the alias. Then the output of the annotate clause is a query set, and this query set can be modified using any other query set operation, including filter, order by, or even an additional call to annotate. So that's what we see here, where we added this additional filter after this annotate. So that's the explanation. Now let's go ahead and make some print statements that'll make this a little clearer. So first, I'm just going to comment this out. Let's do something like this. listing is equal to listing dot object dot get, and then I can get where, let's say, title double underscore search is equal to my search. And then I can print listing, and I can also print out the type of listing. And then maybe I can have this be listing. So if I send this off, we see that this doesn't really work because this searching right here, you have to have a filter. So what I'd have to actually do is have something like title is equal to search, and then I can save that, and then I can make the title actually be equal. So that would be 5 South Woodsman Lane in my case. So if I send something like this off, now everything's successful. And then we can see the listing. So here's the listing. And then we can also see the type of the listing. And then here we see listing.models.listing. This is the class. It's a class of listing. But if we do something like a filter instead, this is what's going to happen. So I can send this off. And then instead, what we're going to get back is a query set. And this is a class of query set. So we get back a different class when we do a filter. And the same thing would happen if we do the annotate. So I can do the annotate, I can remove this, and then I can do search is equal to my vector. So if I save this, I go back here, I send this off, and then we take a look. Well, we get back a query set, just like before. And now each of these query set objects, so this one right here and this one right here, are going to be annotated with our search vector. So another thing that we can do is I can do something like print out my listing search, and then here I can print out listing dot search, and then I can save that. So I want to note that this search, if we open up our listing model, we don't have any piece of data called search. There's nothing here called search, but we can still access it like so, just like how we can access listing.title or listing.description, listing.anything that's in here. But now because we annotated this and provided this alias, we can now access listing.search. So let's see what this looks like. So I can send this off, and it looks like something went wrong here. And what actually went wrong is that this right here is actually an iterable. So I would have to do something like listing at 0.search, and then also listing at 1.search, since we have two listings. Well, I do in my case. So if I go back and send this off again, now it's gonna work. And then we see here, we have this annotated, and we have this annotated. So this one here is for our 3 South Woodsman Lane listing. This one's for our 5 South Woodsman Lane listing. And then this right here is that list of query expressions that's added to each of these query set objects. So here we can see what this actually looks like. Now again, in terms of the gritty implementation details, it's not too important, but now at least we can see what this looks like. So then this search vector, in combination with the search query, is what makes this full text search happen. So hopefully this all makes this a little bit clear. And then another thing that we can do is right here, I can also chain on my dot filter. Then I can have my search, which is going to be equal to my query. And then I can also have is published, is true. And then in this case, this would now fail. But of course, another thing that you can do is, let's say, for listing in listings, you can print out listing.search. And then I can just remove this. And then I can just call this listings. Then if I save this, I go back to Postman, send off this request, go back here. Now, once again, I have my same output, except now without that 3 South Woodsman Lane because that one is not published. All right, so now hopefully we have a good idea of how this works. So now let's go ahead and actually implement this search now. So I'm gonna remove this. I'm gonna remove this comment. And then let's add some additional things that we want to search by. So we're gonna go up here. And then I also want to filter by some other criteria, because you can imagine if we had a front-end portion to this application, you might have some kind of form with multiple fields other than just a search field where you put in your keywords that you want to search by. Maybe you have some additional inputs where you put in like a city, a state, and then you also have some drop downs where you can have something like, is this for sale or for rent? Or is it a house, a condo, townhouse? So we also want to have some additional search criteria that's passed to this as query parameters. So one of which is going to be my city. And then I'm just going to copy this to make this easier. So here we're going to grab a query parameter called city. And then I'm also going to have state. So these you can imagine as 2 different input fields, one for the city, one for the state that you want to search, and then also a max price. So this is going to come from a query parameter called max price. And then here I'm going to try to convert this to be an integer. I'm going to have int max price. So we're going to try to do this. And then if this fails because maybe the user passed some faulty data to this, like the string hello, which can't be converted to an integer, then we're just going to send back an error response. And also I can close up this terminal now. I don't need that. Then this would have an error, and it would say max price must be an integer. And then I can have a status of status.http 400 bad request. And then we can also have bedrooms and bathrooms. So bedrooms is going to be quest.queryparams.get bedrooms. And then the bedrooms, we're also going to try to convert this to an integer. So I'm just going to copy this try except, paste it below here. This is going to be for the bedrooms. And then as for the error message, it'll just say bedrooms must be an integer. Then after that, we're going to have our bathrooms, which is going to be our quest.queryparams.get bathrooms. And then this right here, we want converted to a float. So I'm going to copy this part, paste it here. I'm going to put in bathrooms, and this is going to get converted to a float. And then as for the error message, I'll just say bathrooms must be a floating point value, something like that. And then I'm also going to have an if check where bathrooms is less than 0 or bathrooms is greater than equal to 10. Then I'm just going to set bathrooms to be something like 1.0. And then I'm also going to round bathrooms to 1 decimal place. Then I'm going to have the sale type, which is going to come from a query parameter, which is going to be called sale type. Then I'm going to have an if check where sale type is equal to for sale. Then sale type is going to be equal to the value for sales, spelled just like this, because this is the value. If we go into the models, you can see that here. The value is for sale, the value is for rent. So it has to be exactly like this. But when we pass the value as a query parameter, we're going to expect it to be in a format something like this. Then otherwise, I can just have the sale type default to for rent. And then after that, going to have the home type, which is going to come from quest.queryparams.get home type. And then here I'm also going to have some if checks where home type is equal to house. Then home type is going to be equal to house, spelled like this, because once again, that's what the actual value is here. Just like how the actual value is condo and the actual value is townhouse. So when I go to filter this data, I want it to be this right here. Then I'm going to have an elif for home type is equal to condo. Then home type is going to be condo, spelled like this. Otherwise, we're just going to default it to be the townhouse. So there we are. And then another thing I might do is I'm just going to wrap this also in a try except, just so that way we ensure that some search data was actually sent here. And then if there is no search data, then I'm just going to send back an error that says must pass search criteria. And I'm going to have a status of status.http 400 bad request. So we can save that. So the next thing I want to do is I want to have this be an if check where we have a dot exists. And then we do some stuff here. And then we're going to add on to this. So right now we have this search is equal to the query is published as true, but we're also going to be passing a lot of additional query parameters to this. So I'm going to have city is city. That's another thing we added. And have state is state. And then we have our max price. So this right here, we have our price field inside of our model. So this right here, then we want to check this is less than or equal to our max price. So the way we can do that is with price double underscore LTE is equal to max price. So LTE is just less than or equal to max price. And then we have our bedrooms. And then this value here, we want it to be greater than or equal to the value that's passed as the query parameter. So in this case, we're going to do double underscore GTE, which is greater than or equal to bedrooms. So if the user passed something like 3 bedrooms, we want to bring back listings that have at least 3 bedrooms. And then for bathrooms, same sort of thing. So I'm going to do bathrooms, GTE, and then bathrooms. So if the user passed something like 2.5 bathrooms, we want to make sure that the listings we're filtering have at least 2.5 bathrooms. Then we're going to have sale type be equal to sale type. So if the user passed for sale, we want to make sure we filter by listings that are for sale. Or if they pass for rent, we want to filter only the listings that are for rent. And then home type, same sort of thing. If the user passed a house, we want to filter only houses. If they passed condos, we want to filter only condos, and so forth. And there we go. These are all the values. So then if this exists, then we're going to continue on. But if it does not exist, then instead we're going to return an error response. It's going to be an error, and it's going to say no listings found with this criteria. That'll be a status of status.htp 404 not found. Now, if this right here did not result in true, so not listings.objects.annotate and all this filtering, if this actually exists, then we're going to go ahead and continue, where then we set listings to be equal to this right here. So I'm just going to copy this part. So this listing.objects.annotate, then the dot filter, and I'm going to set this listings variable to be equal to this right here. This is going to retrieve our correct listings, and then this listings is going to hold that query set iterable. So now our next step is going to be to serialize this data, so that way we can pass it back in a response. So I'm going to do listings is equal to listings serializer. So listing serializer, pass in my listings, and pass in many equals true. So that way we have this in a list format. And then finally, the last thing I have to do is just return my success response, where in this case, instead of this success, I'm going to pass back the listings. And then I can do here listings.data, and that's going to get our listings. So there we are. This is now our complete implementation. And then one thing I want to note before we test out is that with the full text search, there's even more things that you can do than what I showed here. So you can even have search ranks. And this is something that will then rank the different results and put them in a very particular order. So there's a lot of details that go on behind this sort of ranking, and it'll make it an even better sort of full text search than with what we just did. But I don't want to go too deep into this since there's quite a few different things you can do when it comes to the full text search, but this video is going to get very long if I go into all these very specific things that you can do. But this right here already gives us a very good search. So now the last thing I need to do is just pass the appropriate query parameters and then test this out. So we're going to have city, we're going to have state, we're going to have max price, we're going to have bedrooms, bathrooms, and then sale type, home type, and that'll be everything. Okay, so for the search, I'm just going to remove this search here. So I'm going to start off with the city. So to make this part easier, I'm just going to open up this create listing. And I'm just going to grab some of these values here. So for the city, I'm going to grab this and plug it into here. And then I'm going to grab the state, plug it into the state. So this params right here just makes it a lot easier, so I don't have to actually go in here and write the query parameters in this sort of format. I can just do it in this nice table. Then for the max price, I'll do something like 900,000. Now our listing itself is less than 900,000, since the price itself is this 699,999. And then we have the bedrooms. So I'm going to do 3, 2.5 bathrooms, because if we check out this listing, we actually have 3 bedrooms, 2.5 bathrooms. And then if I go back for the home type, I'm going to have this, or sorry, this is the sale type. I'm going to have for sale. So it has to be like this, all caps with the underscore. Then the home type, also all caps. And then for the search, so if I save this and just send it off as is, we're going to get no listings found with this criteria. So that actually means that the way that I wrap this in the try except doesn't actually work. So what I need to do is instead have something like if not search, then I'm going to return this. So this is the way I'm going to have it. So now if I send this off, there we go, must pass search criteria. So that now hits that. So let's pass some search criteria. So something like woodsman. And then also note that this right here has to match exactly. So if I had this with a lowercase s and I send that off, no listings found with this criteria. So make sure you have your casing appropriate for these other values that aren't the search. So now if I send this off, now we get back our listings. So this is a list where we only have one object because we only have one published listing. If I publish my other listing, which is the 3 South Woodsman Lane listing, then we'd see that here as well. And then if I wanted a listing with, say, 4 bedrooms, I send that off. No listings found with the criteria. And same thing goes where If, let's say, I wanted 3 bathrooms, send that off, no listings found. Let's go back to 2.5. So that works again. So let's say if I wanted a house with the max price of $650,000. Again, no listings found with that criteria. And then maybe I want a house that's for rent. Send that off. No listings found. Okay. So let's bring it back to for sale. What if I wanted a condo? Again, no listings found. So we have this right here. So now let's take a look at this right over here. So beautiful home with swimming pool. So now we can play around with this search a little bit. So if I pass something like this, so just beauty like this with this weird casing, I send that off, I still get this back. If I do something like beauties, still get this back. If I do something like beauty with a Y, again, I still get this back. What if I added something like a Z? So something like beauties. So in this case, it does not work. But we see that the casing doesn't matter, the plural forms don't matter. There's a lot of different things that you can pass here that will still work. I can even do very beautiful house. So very beautiful house, let's send that off. So it looks like that one didn't work. If we pass in just beautiful, this ends up working. If I pass in very beautiful, this works. Now if I do very beautiful home instead of very beautiful house, we see that that also works. So something like home is something that's actually relevant for the search itself. So that's what that demonstrated right there. But I can pass things like the, if, things like that. And these things don't affect the actual search result because these things aren't really relevant in the search query itself. So that's why we actually have this still working. I can even have beautiful's homes, have both of these in plural form. It'll still work. So that's what's really nice about this search. It doesn't have to match this text exactly. And even the case sensing doesn't really matter, or I guess case sensitivity, I should say. So I can have something like this. It'll still work. So yeah, it's a very nice search. I can even pass something like swim. Here I have swimming pool, but if I pass something like swim, I'll still get this data back. But as soon as I pass something like house, then here I get no listings, but if I pass something like home, then it'll work. Because these are terms that are actually relevant for the search. So now you've seen how to implement a full text search in Django. So definitely a very, very useful thing to utilize in your Django applications. And that's really everything I wanted to cover in this video. So then in our next video, we're going to start to deal with that admin panel and see how we can register our users and our listings to our admin panel because they are both in separate databases. So we're going to see how that works in our next video. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you haven't yet, please hit that like button. It goes a long way to help a channel like mine grow and get recognized so others can benefit from the videos I release as well. Also, I have links in the description that you can check out. I have one for an e-commerce course that you can check out if you're interested in learning to develop an application like that. I also have a link for joining my Web Development Kings Facebook group. That way, if you want to personally ask me something, then you can go right ahead and do that, and I'll happily help you out. It doesn't cost you anything, so if you're scratching your head about something, then you can go right ahead and ask me to help you out. Only questions I probably won't answer are if you want me to help you build some kind of personal project, as I don't quite have the time for that sort of thing, but anything else is fair game. You can also post something in the group itself, that way other developers in the group can help you out with something as well. The group is all about growing your expertise as a developer, so if you're interested in that, then go ahead and click that link in the description and join the family. Also, if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button, turn on those notification bells, that way you don't miss out when I release a new video, and I'll see you in the next one.